she perceives as messages from God that the rapture is nigh, the end times are nigh, and she has to go and wait for rapture out in the desert. So she just leaves her job, ups her life, leaves it all behind, stops paying a mortgage. The bank's just going to take her house away. Takes her daughter with her. No one else will go with her initially because her cult say they weren't invited. She was. And she just goes out into the desert to wait for God and the rapture to take them up to heaven.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a full-on mental breakdown, essentially. But still at this point in the film, it's not immediately clear if you're supposed to be on board with it or if you're supposed to think, wow, this woman is mentally ill.
No, it is crazy how people would give up their own safety or sense of survival for metaphysical or spiritual ideals.
Yeah, mentally ill people.
Yeah, I know in the end she was supposed to be in purgatory, but I thought right at the end the camera was going to pan back and she was going to be stood above the mound of where she'd buried her daughter, and she was just going to be stuck in a sort of psychological / metaphorical purgatory.
She was just, in her own head,
Yeah, she goes out to the desert and is waiting, and this policeman turns up, and he's obviously taking an interest, like a mother and a child out in the desert. He's just a bit concerned, as you would be. And they wait there so long that they become quite distressed and hungry, and nothing's happening. The rapture isn't happening. And it gets to the point where the daughter kind of says, like, why do we have to wait? Can't we just, like, kill ourselves and go to heaven now? And the mum's like, oh, yeah, we could just do that. So, and I think this scene's actually handled really nicely, I should add. The mum basically shoots her daughter in the back of her head, intending to then shoot herself in the head and ascend to heaven. But she, chickens out, whistles out at the last minute, doesn't pull the trigger on herself, and later justifies it as saying that suicide's a sin and she wouldn't go to heaven if she did it to herself. And, so then she is arrested down the road for having murdered her daughter in cold blood in a really seemingly gruesome, horrible act of violence, but one that you completely understand where the character's coming from.
Yeah.
You don't view her as an evil, bad person for doing it.
So I thought the ending was more ambiguous
disturbed.
in the sense it could be read that way.
And then she's taken to jail, and then we're treated to the finale of the film, which is this big twist of sorts, really, because I don't think many people expect the rapture to turn out to be real. I think, regardless of how you take this film, whether you take it from a kind of pro-religion or anti-religion point of view, I think at this point you're kind of expecting her to either turn on religion or find the true value in religion. But what actually happens is the four horsemen of the apocalypse descend upon Earth, the trumpets of the rapture play, the jail cells like crumble to pieces, the policeman latches onto her as a kind of guide because he's a lifelong atheist, but he can now see that God is real. There's blatant evidence before his eyes. She told him this was going to happen. So he's like, all right, where do we go? They go back out to the desert. Her daughter descends from heaven to kind of guide them. And she basically says, like, yeah, look, you've got to accept God into your heart and say you love him, and you'll come up to heaven with the rest of us. It's the rapture. You were right, Mum. You were right all along. The policeman's like, oh, great. Yeah, I accept God. I love God. And whizzes off to heaven despite being an atheist his whole life. And the mum's just like, you know what, mate? You made me kill my daughter. I've lived a life of suffering. If you're real, then, like, go fuck yourself. You're a horrible piece of work, and I don't want anything to do with you. And she refuses to say that she loves God and go to heaven, and instead just lives out in this dark limbo in the desert for the rest of her life, for all eternity.
I don't think she's really thought about how long eternity really is. After about 20 minutes, she might be like, oh, maybe I do love God. Let me in.
Well, that's it. I mean, I saw the ending as a kind of messy exploration of this end result of religion. I didn't care for it particularly. I just felt messy. Although what you said, Scott, about it being basically a Gnostic approach of like, yeah, God is real, but he's a dick, and I'm not getting involved with him. I really love that. I love that interpretation of it. I'm all in on that.
There was a video of Stephen Fry being interviewed and expressed the exact same sentiment, and it's one that I, felt for a while because the thing is, regardless of whether or not things are going to be nice and fine in the end, like suffering in the moment is still very real, and it's still suffering. It doesn't really matter if you like kick a child, then give them a lollipop. Like they're probably going to be happy with that after the kick, but it's still like not a nice thing to do. And I subscribe to the idea that if God is real, then like fuck them, I think if they are real, and I should add, if they are real and they are all powerful, omnipotent, then they are a horrible, horrible piece of work.
That is the demi-edge in Gnosticism. That's exactly what the Gnostics teach. So if I have something in my own conscience that wants to take a spiritual path, then it definitely appeals to my more cynical nature. Like, yeah, there is a God, but I'm not saying he's a nice person. Though.
But I think it's a wonderful ending in that it completely recontextualizes the entire film really in a really interesting way. And I think it raises so many questions and interesting things to talk about. And yeah, I think it's just quite a powerful, legitimate bit of art, really, this film, because of it. It's I mean, if nothing else, it's a big swing of an ending. As you say, it was very similar to Kevin Smith's original ending for Red State, but he couldn't get the funding together to be able to shoot it. It was going to be too expensive. And I think that's a big point against this film, to be honest, is it kind of oversteps its ability to realize what it's trying to do. I don't think this film is particularly well directed, and I think it's certainly at the ending kind of hampered by a lack of budget and a lack of...
Yeah, a film that does the apocalyptic drama stuff quite well is the one I've mentioned earlier, Frailty, directed by Bill Paxton. I think you'd really enjoy that one, Saul. But is there anything else you would both like to discuss before we wrap this up?
I mean, basically, as I say, when I first watched this film, I didn't know what to make of it. I wasn't sure how it was being pitched because it is such an odd film. But something about it stayed with me. I mean, I think I gave it like a 6 out of 10 on IMDb back in 2012, but something about it stayed with me and made me want to go back to it. And, I think that's the mark of legitimate art, really, is when there's a nugget of something that keeps you coming back and you keep getting more out of it the more you kind of consume it. And although it's taken me 10 years to come back to it, nearly, I really did get a lot out of it on this repeat viewing, and I dare I say, I actually really loved this film going back to it. But I think it's a very interesting, admirable swing, and arguably a miss, arguably not, of a film. So no, I really glad I rewatched it, to be honest. I really liked it a lot.
I'm really glad you recommended it, actually, because it's it inadvertently has Gnostic themes, and it's a really interesting film, and I don't think I would have discovered it otherwise.
I think it's a very interesting film as well, just in that, it wasn't massively well received. I think it flopped at the box office, made about a third of its budget back, I think, on its initial release. Critically, I think it got largely mixed reviews, but not particularly positive praise. But then it does pop up from time to time. If you ever look at these, lists of films to see before you die, and I mean, I think most famously it was in it was included in the 1001 Movies You Must See Before You Die book by Stephen J. Schneider. Very, famous bit of not exactly literature, but a resource for fans of film.
It's respected.
I think it made Roger Ebert's top 10 of the year when it came out. It might have even been his favourite of the year. It is a film that seems to have a sort of cult following within very film critic-y kind of people. So I think it's got an interesting significance within cinema history.
I must admit, I found it very messy. I didn't care for it particularly. It came across to me as more of a clumsy exploration of, not even exploration really, but yeah, a bit of a clumsy destructuring of religion. But I must admit, your theory on it being a Gnostic ending has gone right up my flagpole, and I really like that. That feels like a much more solid interpretation, as opposed to, religion, it's just not as what you think it is it? But at least it feels like that's more grounded in some kind of established philosophy, or at least school of thought in some way. So that's kind of helped me appreciate it a bit more. But I think ultimately, yeah, as a film, it's not made me question anything or look at anything differently, but perhaps I'm not an open audience in that sense.
I've actually just pulled out a copy of 1001 Movies You Must See Before You Die and found the entry. Yeah, I to be honest, I was expecting to find, because the edition I have is the, they update it every few years. They'll take a few films out and put a few new films in. I was expecting to find this was like one of the first films to have been kicked out in favour of adding Brokeback Mountain in or something, because I think I've got the 2005 edition of the book, because it was the cheapest one on eBay. I didn't want to get a brand new one. I just thought I'd get one that's about 10 years old, but not the original. That'll be like 2p. Anyway, but if you want to know what it says, because it's only got a little half page on it, it says, few movies have treated religion seriously, and fewer still have explored evangelical Christianity on its own theological terms. This is what Michael Tolkien does in The Rapture, which may be viewed with equal pleasure as a spiritual melodrama, a faith-based fable, and an eccentric fairy tale with roots in a real religious subculture. Mimi Rodgers plays Sharon, a swinging single who enjoys cruising for foursomes with a sleazy male friend. Then she hears about a religious movement that emphasizes a personal relationship with God, whose day of judgment, complete with transcendent rapture that will whisk good souls to heaven, is said to be coming soon. Her newfound faith helps her weather turbulent storms, such as her husband's death. When she thinks the end of times is imminent, she takes her daughter to a lonely patch of desert where they await God's saving hand. In the film's most audacious twist, the rapture actually does arrive, but by now suffering has led her to project the idea of a just and merciful deity. At once a psychological drama, a reflection on faith and free will, and a crisp 1990s variation on what Hollywood used to call the woman's picture, this offbeat parable offers rich rewards for the open-minded moviegoer.
I find it interesting, like the way that certain bits of that was phrased, the way it's like, for example, saying that her religion helps her weather the turbulence of her husband's death, which I don't think it does at all. The way I read that is it helps her ignore it and not deal with it.
Yeah, the way I read it is that the husband's death, is the catalyst that kind of kicks her religious fanaticism into another gear, and and to be honest, I don't think I'm misreading the film though, and thinking that. Okay. But yeah, Alan, you can pick next time. I kind of
if I come across something that I feel like would be a nice fit, I'll definitely let you know.
Okay, great.
It's been a very interesting discussion.
I want to thank you both for coming on the show. Hopefully we'll get you back on soon. Okay, take care. Bye.